Meet PitchDB, the ultimate platform for speakers looking to make their mark on podcasts, conferences, and media outlets. PitchDB provides access to over 3 million platforms, ensuring you find the perfect avenue for your message. With AI integrations, your bios and pitches are tailored uniquely to each opportunity, giving you the edge you need. Join now at pitchdb.com.
Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. The first thing I want to say to my guest today, Ricky Howard, who is a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. Thank you for your service. My grandfather was a retired colonel in the Air Force. He built Air Force bases around the world. My brother was in the Air Force. I had 2 uncles who went to West Point, and my dad and his other brother were in the Army. So,
oh, wow.
I really appreciate the time that you've given to serve our country.
Well, thanks to your family. It sounds like a big military family. So,
yeah, that, there's a thing you did in that, though.
No, I hear you. I feel like I should be thanking everybody else for giving me the opportunity to serve. It was the time of my life for sure. So,
well, and you've continued that. So I'd love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your background. You have such an extensive military background, but now you're using that expertise to help people in business understand the world of government contracts, which I know can be very unwieldy.
Yeah, no, it sure can. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to kind of go into my background and what we're doing now, and then maybe we can see, how that can inform your audience and hopefully give them some value. But yeah, so I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I spent first half of my career flying reconnaissance aircraft. I was a navigator, and 9/11 kicked off right after I joined, so it was pretty busy. And about halfway through, I transitioned as I became more of a senior officer into acquisition. So that's essentially the profession in the government of putting companies on contract for the government to provide everything that we use, right? So from software, weapon systems, accounting, legal services, construction, landscaping. I mean, really anything you could think of. You'd be surprised just the breadth of what the government's buying. And, I guess during that process, because since I came into it, I would say most acquisitions guys in the government start off that way. That's at least in the Air Force, that's their profession from the time they come in to the time they retire. So for me, being operational, I had a slightly different perspective, because I was on the user end of what was being purchased and not always happy with how long it took and what we received. Because, from what the user needs to what the user gets, a lot can change there. So when I came into it, I had some ideas about how I could hopefully make at least the piece that I was running better. But one thing I noticed was not only was there some frustration in the government side, but in the industry side, there was an enormous amount of frustration. In fact, I was doing, at least initially in acquisitions, I was doing rapid technology development. And so I was trying to work with I was working with a lot of the MIT tech startups, Silicon Valley, but I was reaching out a lot of the time to companies that had no idea that the government even bought what they were selling. So that was one problem. And then the other problem was a lot of the companies that I was working with were so frustrated with the length of the process. And just it is such a different, the steps are so much different than selling B2B or B2C that I felt that, especially upon retiring, this is an area where, like you said, I could keep my fingers in it. And I thought, I could really help a lot of businesses that don't understand what really needs to be done to effectively sell. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now. We started DoDContract.com, and, we've been helping companies since I retired in 2019, sell to the government, mainly on the sales process. And we also have a relatively new CRM, or I like to call it the sales management system for government contracts. So that kind of happened organically. I built it for my clients because they didn't have anything that was really usable. And then over time, we've started selling that individually as well. So yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. That's a pretty big nutshell. I am familiar to a small extent with I live outside of Los Angeles, so I'm familiar with working with the city of Los Angeles to help create marketing materials, logos, things like that for projects. Right. And the process there, right? And all the paperwork you fill out, and are you certified? For me, it would be as a minority in a woman-owned business. Right. And then have I gone through that certification process? So I know that there are things that you can do in the process to get a leg up or to be more of a preferred if you will, vendor be looked at a little bit differently. But I'm really intrigued by all of the different nuances that I know my audience will not be aware of, but that they should be aware of, because many of them will have products or services that the government wants to use or needs to use, especially with all the technology. You talked about tech, right? With everything coming up so quickly, we all, as lay people, can't understand how to use everything effectively, but there is somebody out there who does. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to flag, how amazing is it for you to have been the end user, then become the person who helped get the right thing to the end user, right?
Oh, yeah.
User experience is, I talk about it a lot when I teach digital media, but it's not just obviously online. It's everything to do with the experience that we have with a brand at the interface. How easy is it to use? Is it comfortable? Is it soft? If it's towels or like other things like that you're getting versus the landscaping and the bigger machinery and tech tools.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're right. I think it's one of the most important things. I mean, in its true, it's true in a lot of different spaces, right? So it was certainly true for me going from, flying to acquisitions, just knowing, hey, this is what we need. This is the type of thing that we should be providing. It's also true, I see it in sales, for instance, so like for sales executives selling in the public sector, which is where I fundamentally exist. I mean, a lot of the best people there came from the agencies. They weren't acquisitions officers, but maybe they worked at, NGA, or they worked in the VA, or they came from, Department of Energy. So a lot of times people that were in organizations using different tools and products had a really deep understanding of how to sell to those people and how to provide them value. And I mean, it's true. I mean, we could probably talk about 100 different industries where, that same thing's true. But yeah, no, that's great. And it helps me. It helps me understand my clients, and it helps me understand what the government wants. And it makes us pretty effective at what we're doing.
Yeah. What's the first thing people should understand if this is a line that they want to pursue?
Yeah. So I think big picture, this is how I would think about it, is the U.S. government is the single biggest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And a lot of people don't realize that. And as I said in the beginning, it's not just weapons and airplanes. That's what we think about because that's what we see on the news, but it's school supplies. And, every military base, if you think about it, is really just a small city or a big town that has fire departments, police departments, supermarkets, housing, golf courses, schools, office buildings. So everything that you need to run those buildings, to the people in them, just to make that base, the infrastructure work, the government buys, and they buy it from small businesses and large companies. And then not to mention everything that the mission, right? The mission of the government. So, I mean, help desk services. I mean, I could go on. We literally wouldn't have enough time to go over everything. So that's the first thing I would say. So a tremendous amount of money being spent every year on just about everything you could think of. But you combine that with the fact that less than 0.5% of small businesses in this country are selling to the U.S. government. And the number's going down. And the government is required by law to buy from small businesses. And that number is about 23% of purchasing is going to go to small businesses. It varies by agency, but so there's the Small Business Association sets a goal for the government to achieve. And they do a pretty good job of meeting that or exceeding it. So it is a big opportunity for companies that want to sell to the government, to bring in a new revenue stream, understanding that there's a long timeline involved. And that's what maybe doesn't get talked about very often. So it is a little bit longer than selling to, say, a B2B or B2C sale. So it's good to have your business established before you go into government contracting in most cases. So that's usually what I recommend. So I would say that's the big picture opportunity.
So the sales cycle is long. Are we talking 6 months, a year, 2 years? Or does it vary depending on what category we're looking at?
It does change. Every contract, like every product, service, technology is a little bit different, right? So the government can buy in a lot of different ways. What I tell people is if you have never sold to the government, plan on 12 to 18 months before you win your first contract. That's not always true. I mean, I've got clients that have won things in 4 months. I've got clients that have taken 2 years. But what ends up happening is you're building a pipeline, you're influencing the process. And one thing that is similar that a lot of people miss with this whole process is relationships that you develop with the procurement folks. That's really what's going to help win your contracts. It's going to build trust. There's a few things you have to learn, but once you build, a pipeline of solid opportunities, and it doesn't have to be a full-time job, but over time, once you start winning those, now the timeline can be reduced a lot further, right? Because you'll now have a cyclical, purchases coming in from the government. A lot of these contracts are going to be 3 to 5 year contracts, and they can be quite lucrative. So it's worth putting the time in, but it does take time and it takes persistence, just like anything that's worth doing. So hopefully that answers your question. But now I will also say this, once you're on contract with the government, now I can reduce that timeline down to 30 days in some cases. Because if I'm on contract with you and you're the government and you're buying software licenses from me, we're working together. I'm making sure that you're happy. Hey, Rick, I need 6 more licenses. This happens all the time, right? So that's something, because since you're already on contract, that's something that can be turned around much quicker.
Okay.
But it's getting that initial contract, especially your first one as a business. It just takes a little bit of time and persistence.
Yeah. Now, what about the payment cycle? Because I've worked with universities, systems, and on projects, and I know that it can take months to get paid. And I've talked to other people who say the same thing about working with public entities, right? That the sales cycle can be long, but then also the contracting, getting all the paperwork done, and then actually getting paid for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I would say I kind of put it in the same category as working with, large businesses also. So if, anyone in your audience is sold to a small business versus like a Boeing or like a large company, I find they also tend to, it might be 30, 60 days before you get paid for, whatever you're providing. But again, this all depends on what you're selling to the government. If you win a services contract, you're typically billing the government, right? And then they're going to reimburse you in 30, 60 days. Now, these things can, if there's issues with funding in Congress, so these are the things that you can't really control as a government contractor, but the government always pays. They do. And there's also financial institutions out there that are set up like strictly for government contractors, because they know, like, for instance, you could be a small woman-owned business and win a $10 million accounting services contract with the government. And now you've got to pay 60 people or 10 people, however many it is, the first 60 days without maybe seeing that reimbursement. And so what they do is since you have that government contract, that's the backing they need to provide the funding up front. But yeah, 30, 60 days, and sometimes it's immediate. It just depends on what you're selling. So yeah, I can't cover everything, but that's pretty much what you expect. And they're going to pay, even if, by the way, if you win a contract and the government cancels that contract on you, like let's say, I've had people show up and like the day of, the government will cancel a contract. Well, that doesn't mean you don't get paid. Oh. So even though they have the right to terminate for convenience, they also have an obligation to pay you for all the effort you put into going up to that first day. So, I have clients that, showed up for, a week, like moving stuff out of one military base into the other. They show up on the first day, they get canceled, and they still take 80% of the contract value. So payment's not something that I would say that's not one of the things to worry about. And I also want to say that there is a difference, like state, local, university, that's not the same contracting process. Right. So yeah, it can look similar, but it doesn't fall under the federal acquisitions regulations.
Nice. And okay, so you've talked about software, you've talked about moving services. So obviously, it really is anything you could think of. Is there a specific area that you're seeing as easier for small businesses to get into? For instance, if I'm a brand expert marketing podcast professor who does workshops for people on that stuff, is there a place for me in this ecosystem? Or is there more of a need for actual products?
Yeah, so there's absolutely a place for you. And this one of the nice things about selling to the government is all government contracts are, with the exception of some classified work, but even the classified contracts, the purchases themselves are public, right? Very few things are going to be protected. So we could go in right now and I could show you exactly how much the government spent on marketing services over the past 3 years, I could do it in about 30 seconds, right? And so what we could find is, okay, so let's say the government spent, $1.2 billion in marketing services over the past 3 years. We could break that down and we could see, okay, how much of that was small business versus large business? And how much of that was woman-owned small business? Which agencies hire small woman-owned businesses more than others? Mm-hmm. And then we can also see how they put people on contract. So we could get a really strong idea of what you'd need to do by reverse engineering that entire process. And just since I have worked with marketing agencies and advertising, the government does spend money on advertising, marketing, even documentary film production, so there's a lot of interesting things out there.
Oh, wow. And this all stuff that somebody, if they wanted to investigate this, they could invest in your CRM and
and they don't, I mean,
or is this something that you would do a call with somebody and kind of help them figure out where they should move?
So what I would say actually is the first step, they don't have to pay me a dime. This is for free. They can go to usaspending.gov. It's a government website, and you can go in there. It's also a government website, so you have to play around a little bit. But you can go in there and you can start checking out the spending on your own, just to get a sense of, okay, what does the government spend in my area? Is it worth? I mean, it's rare, but there are a few areas where people approach me with where I told them, it's probably not worth the time you're going to have to put in to get it. But that happens very rarely. For me, yes, usually what would happen is somebody, if they were interested in consulting or coaching services, they could certainly hire me. One of the things that we do is road mapping for typically established companies and putting their plan together. A lot of times now people will come in and buy GovClose, and sometimes that will come with us training their sales team on how to go after some of these opportunities. So that's another way of getting to us.
Nice. What were some of the things that surprised you about moving from the world of being in the military to being on the other side?
Oh. Well, there were a lot of nice surprises, not having to get up at 5:30 in the morning to go work out at the base. That was a nice thing. And of course, spending a lot more time with my family and not, missing birthdays and Christmases and things like that. But I think that for me, it did take me a good year or so to really get my footing underneath me from transitioning from the military to figuring out what I actually wanted to do. Certainly, I started consulting when I got out, and a lot of that happened pretty organically because companies knew what I did in the Air Force, right? So they were reaching out. But I'd say it was about a year of just kind of figuring out what I really wanted to do, how I wanted to help people. And I think a lot of veterans in particular are looking for that next mission, something to focus on. So that's probably what it was for me, is just making sure that I had the right mission to go into and just hit it.
Yeah. And thinking about that, do you hire a lot of veterans in your business to work with you? Because they obviously have the inside expertise as well, and that same drive. Because that's one thing that you hear is that veterans make great employees because you are used to having to do things in a regimented fashion, but you're also used to having to, in your case, and not every position, I'm sure, but think on your feet, right? And think quickly and assess situations.
Yeah, no, so I hire veterans all the time. We do a lot of different consulting efforts, and I partner with people. And, for what I do for selling to the government, just as an example, we would provide our-time business developers to companies to help them find leads, set up meetings and whatnot with, different federal agencies. And so, I touched on it in the beginning a little bit, but so if you're trying to sell to the Air Force, probably makes sense to have somebody on your team that was in the Air Force, because that person can get onto a military base. That person can already naturally understands the structure, the rank structure, who can buy, who can't. They may have to learn how to sell. They're constantly training military men and women of all ranks. It seems like every 2 years or so you're getting a new degree or you're getting a new qualification. And so, these are people that are used to leading and managing under enormous, I guess you could say, very stressful conditions, and also, managing large buckets of money and not to mention the personal risk. So typically I find the veterans that I've hired to be awesome and just to go out there and they do what we ask them to. So. And
when you created your CRM, was that because you saw there was nothing like that on the market? Going to government websites can be very unwieldy. I know even just going to the Los Angeles County website, and I'm on the list to go get all the trainings and all that stuff, but does it fit into my schedule? Can I navigate this website? Is that the kind of work I want to do? So it can be really overwhelming if you're not used to this world. So is that why you ended up creating your own CRM?
Yeah, it was really selfish. It was really selfish. Because what would happen is I would come in companies of all sizes, big companies and small companies, whether they were selling to the government or not. Since we focus on the sales process, especially, if we were at the point where we're on retainer with a company working with them and their team, it would be they're using spreadsheets or they're using, something like you pick the big CRM tool that's out there. None of them were created for selling to the government. So I would find myself, no matter what the tool was, spending hours trying to modify. I feel like I'm an expert in almost all of them at this point, having spent so much time trying to just arrange them. So whether it's just the owner or their sales team, So they could go in and actually understand the steps that were going to be involved that they would have to take each lead or opportunity through. And after doing that for a couple of years and spending, I don't know how many hours, I just said, I've got to build something that I can just put in front of each new client, and that's what they're going to use. And so that's really how it started. So it's really designed for managing the sales process and taking the lead and turning that into a closed contract. So that's what we built. And yeah, that's really the origin of it. And it just so happens to be pretty unique out there right now. So does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah. No, that really does. And I was also seen on your website that you oversaw the largest foreign military sales portfolio, which was over $82 billion. And you talked about an example of if a small woman-owned accounting firm got a contract that was worth millions of dollars. Is that always the norm, that the contracts are going to be in the millions? Are there contracts that are smaller? So if somebody is a very small business and they say, I'd be happy with in the tens of thousands of dollars to just try this out first, make sure that we are fit for each other and that this is something I want to continue to pursue. Is that kind of opportunity also open?
Yeah, I mean, it runs the gambit from dollars to billions of dollars in contracts, right? And then I just to point out, so that figure, that $82 billion, there are so many people besides myself involved with managing that amount of contracts. Sure. I just happened to be the point man out in Saudi Arabia that was kind of in charge of it all from that perspective. But yeah, there are contracts of all sizes. And, in the beginning, you're probably not going to win $20 million contract. I don't even think you want to, because you really want to understand the process. So it's much better. Like, for instance, we had a client that, if you do provide training, you could provide a 1-week workshop where you fly out to, Pensacola or another base. And, you're teaching marketing, you're teaching leadership or, diversity, whatever it is that they want to learn. That's a great way to do it, because now you're in a smaller bucket, fits under something called simplified acquisitions, and it's something for small businesses. So you might go out there and it might be $150,000 or $75,000 a week where you're training people. It's a great way to get started. And yeah, there's certainly, I think, contracts that would be more reasonable to see as a first contract coming in, just to kind of understand the whole process.
Yeah. That's very helpful. Gosh, I had another question that just flew straight out of my head.
Yeah. Well, government contracting isn't the most entertaining subject matter out there. One of the things that we try to do is at least put the truth out so people understand that, there's certainly enormous benefit that can come from it, but there is a process to it. And it's not, there was a movie called War Dogs that kind of made it look like this was a get rich quick, or like, hey, this is an easy thing to do. You just write a proposal and win a contract, and it's almost always not that simple. So.
Right. Well, and that's what I wanted to ask about was the certifications, because I mentioned earlier, sometimes I know working with like the County of Los Angeles, it's good for me to be able to say I have this certification or that certification.
Yeah.
Is that helpful in this process as well?
I mean, it's good to have certifications. I always tell our clients not to lead with the certification. So, and look, there's 1,000 different ways that, people could buy in the government and a lot of different opinions but mine, I never hired a company because they had a certification. Mm-hmm. Now, the certification that could be the icing on the cake. Yeah. But you always want to lead with what problem are you solving? Because that's what the government, and the government's not stupid, right? So like they can see if you've done it before, they're going to want to know, is this a solution, that we need? Does it solve the problem that I have? And then if they have 3 companies to choose from and you happen to be a woman-owned small business or 8A, something like that, as long as you get it early enough, what you can do, now this is just strategy for everyone out there, is you want to find opportunities before solicitation comes out, and you begin that relationship with the government. And then you can tell them, in addition to how you recommend them solving the problem, that you have a certification. And what the government can do is set aside opportunities for certain types of businesses. So if, they're going to be hiring somebody to do marketing training for 6 months, and you are able to get them to set it aside for a woman-owned small business, well, you've just eliminated, 90% of the competition that you were going to have. So, and then of course, if you were 8A or something, 8A is a disadvantaged business certification, that allows the government to sole source contract without the competition. So you could end up winning that contract without having to compete for it. So yeah, there's certainly, depending on which one you have, there's certainly some benefits there.
Yeah. Well, and I went to richardchoward.com, but dodcontract.com would be the appropriate place for people to go to learn more about the services, the CRM, reach out to you. Do you do, and do you do free strat calls just to see if you're a good fit to work with somebody or not?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. So usually what happens is if I give the ability to schedule a free consultation, my schedule gets packed. So that's something that's not always up there. But right now we do have waiting lists. We have paid consultations, and we do, with GovClose, that's something where I meet with anyone that buys that I meet with, because I want to make sure, that not only it works for them, and, the success of the tool itself is ensuring that the people who are using it are winning contracts and doing well. So that's something where we're usually working directly with people. But I would say, look, if you're looking to learn more and, right now you don't want to invest any money, but just want maybe some time just to learn more, so they got a couple things they could do. They could go to our podcast, that's DoD Contract Academy. They could go to our YouTube channel. It's the same name. And so there we have, not only do we have me just kind of rambling on the different strategies and techniques, because almost everything I give to our consulting clients that are kind of on the higher end, it's the same. I might be doing some of that, but I'm teaching it for free. So you can go there and learn how to do it. And those are some good places to start, I would say. And we also have a book. It's called The Government Contracting Planner. So you can pick that up on Amazon. And so there's a few things that you can do at very low cost, and just to get yourself started and learn more. And we also, by the way, interview a lot of our clients and other small businesses and even some large businesses that are selling to the government, just so people can get that perspective. Okay, what am I in for? How's it work for some others? What's the real deal here?
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love it when people have a variety of ways for people to learn from them, because you're adding so much value to people who want to find out about this world, but don't want to just Google, and maybe they end up on the wrong website and go down a rabbit hole of misinformation, right? Yeah. You can give them, here are the options, here are different ways you can learn about this, and I'm here if and when you want to work with me and dive into this a little deeper.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense, especially in something like government contracting. If you can learn what the landscape looks like ahead of time and make a decision if it's something you really want to go after and get some good advice, then you can start walking through, some of either the paid tools or, setting up your registration. So it's a lot of steps that you can take there. But, we're happy to talk to people. We're happy to have them on the website and using our system. And anyone that wants to reach out, please do. And they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, certainly. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there any trends that you see coming up in the world of government contracting?
I would say this. It depends on your industry. It depends on the agency you're selling to. And super big picture, it can also depend on what's happening in government. So if the government is having a hard time, deciding on or coming to agreement on the budget, that can delay things, right? So you can see some delays in the purchases of some new types of opportunities. And there's a lot of disclaimers to that. So depending on what you're selling, things could trend that way. Trends that have happened in the past couple of years. So for instance, during COVID, the trend was an enormous spend on things like face masks that the government wasn't buying before, right? There's a trend right now in AI. So the government's very interested in investing a lot of money in startups. So for the tech developers out there, software developers, there's a whole program that invests in companies that are developing new and innovative technological solutions. And, a lot of my clients use that funding instead of venture capital because,
amazing.
So, I have clients that have won $8, $9, $10 million in SBIR, they call it SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Funds, to help develop a solution that not only can the government use, but commercially it can be available too. And that's another great way to go. So, but yes, right now, trend in AI in the government, just like there is
everywhere else.
Where else, exactly.
Fantastic. Do you have any final words of wisdom for people who are looking to investigate and explore the world of government contracting?
Yeah, what I tell everyone is if you want to go into government contracting, in 99% of the cases, first focus on the company that you have. Make sure that you have, solid commercial sales, you have a great product or solution. Mm-hmm. And once you have that established, now, put a little bit of time aside or maybe give a salesperson the job of setting up the federal acquisitions piece of your business. It's nice. And I think what my clients benefit from is having a commercial line of revenue as well as a government line of revenue. Mm-hmm. And that really helps offsets, the fluctuations of the economy. Also helps them when they go to sell their companies because now, government contracts, especially if you have, government contracts are 3-year, 5-year contracts that are pretty lucrative. That can really help, and it can help you build your business and just give you a little bit more security. So, that's the advice. Take a look at it if you meet that criteria, and go to usaspending.gov, go to my website, dodcontract.com, and we can help you out as well.
Fantastic. And Ricky, I always like to ask if my guests have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, verse, some words that either are resonating with you right now or that help get you through every day.
I am terrible at giving you like a word by word quote, but I could paraphrase, right? And I'm pretty sure I'm sure you've heard it before, but it was basically, I think it was President Coolidge back in the day that said persistence and determination trump. He listed three things: Trump's education, Trump's genius, and Trump's talent. Like, it's persistence and determination that really wins the day. So that's my favorite quote. It's true in government contracting, it's true in the military, and it's true in just about everything in life. So yeah, that's it. That's from me. That's the motto.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing and disseminating some of the myths and, unknowns around government contracting. I really appreciate your time today, Ricky Howard. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. I'm Annika Jackson, the host, and I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their expertise with you. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.